Everyone, good evening. How are you? I think it's so funny that you guys sit in the last, the last chair possible. It's just funny. It's funny. اتفضلوا لو عايزين في مكان هنا لو عايزين اتفضلوا. If you want to move up, you don't have to, but that way you can see the PowerPoint better. We have with us today Angelina. Um, Angelina Awad, and she is a PhD student in, oh my God, I lost it. No. Clinical psychology, I'm so sorry. Clinical psychology. She's very knowledgeable, and she's come here to talk to us about emotional intelligence. We don't have somebody translating, but I think we can translate as a group. So if there's a word that someone doesn't understand, let's translate together and help each other, okay? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see some of you. I was here a couple of months ago, and I had so much fun speaking with you all. For people who were at my last talk, it's going to be very similar. We're talking about very similar things when it comes to emotions. But this time, I'm going to be talking about emotional intelligence. Has anyone heard of this term before? Is anyone familiar with what emotional intelligence is? It's okay if not, because this is what this talk is for. That's totally okay. All right, so I'm gonna start with a quick overview of what emotions are, and then we'll go into explaining what is emotional intelligence. We'll break it down a little bit more, and then we're going to practice. I'm gonna give you examples, and we can talk through what it's like to talk to kids when they are feeling emotional, what it is like for us trying to deal with kids that are a little bit difficult when they're feeling angry or sad or upset. And we'll talk through how to make that experience a little bit easier. Okay, so what are emotions? Does anyone who was here last time want to explain for anyone what emotions are? I'm a therapist, so I'm so okay with silence. What are examples of some emotions? Happiness. I heard happiness from the other therapist. What else? What are some emotions that your kids are experiencing? What are some of the most emotions? Sadness. Yeah, sadness. Frustration. Good. What other emotions are your kids showing? Bored. Yes, that's an emotion. All the time. What else? So we have sadness, we have frustration, we have boredom. They acting hurt all the time. Okay. How is that different than sadness?
No,
It's different. Okay. What makes it different?
but if he said, I know he said, but if he hurt, he just scared me first.
Okay.
My head, my arm,
Yeah.
it scared me.
Yeah, so it's anxiety. Okay, so see, we have all these examples of different emotions, and now Diana's here, so we're gonna make her translate for us. So a bunch of different types of emotions. What makes them similar is just think of them as reactions, okay? So the psychology field actually doesn't have a good definition of what emotions are. So if you don't know what emotions are, that's okay, because the experts don't know what emotions are either. But what we can agree on is that it's a reaction to something, either that something is coming from inside, it can be thoughts, it can be something we tell ourselves, or it can be a reaction to something that happens externally. So situations that we're in, people that we talk to, they can make us feel different emotions. It's important to know that all emotions are very natural, okay? Even the ones we think are bad, like sadness, anger, anxiety, frustration, boredom, those are natural to feel. But what is important to understand is what we do with that emotion. So for our kids, we don't want to be shaming them or telling them not to feel something because it's natural for them to feel it, but we can teach them how to deal with their emotions in a way that's healthier for both us and them. Okay? Any summarizing that we need to do? Okay. Any questions about what are emotions? I always like to tell people, think of emotions as information. Think of it almost like an alarm. We think of fire alarms as, it's annoying, it's obnoxious, it's very loud, but it tells us something important, that there's a fire. Our emotions can be the exact same thing. We can feel something and it can make us feel bad, but it's telling us something important. And this is where this piece of emotional intelligence comes in. All right. I basically said the exact same thing here. Okay, so what is emotional intelligence? So emotional intelligence is one of those things that is one big thing made up of smaller things, okay? So we're gonna go through each of them one by one. So one definition of emotional intelligence says that it's made up of 4 skills, okay? The first one is the ability to see and understand emotions accurately. That's the first piece. The second one is the ability to actually feel our emotions in a way that can help us make decisions in a way that is helpful. The third is the ability to understand emotional language and use that emotional information, again, in a way that is helpful. And then the fourth is the ability to regulate your own and other people's emotions in a way that helps encourage growth and overall well-being, okay? So, every 2 slides would be great.
احنا بنتكلم عن الذكاء العاطفي، ومعلش انا ما حضرتش الجزء الاولاني مش عارفه اقوله بس اتس فاين. هو عباره عن 4 مهارات الذكاء العاطفي. اول مهاره هي ان احنا نستوعب المشاعر وندركها. تاني واحده هي ان احنا نفهم المشاعر عشان توصلنا لاخذ القرارات. تالت واحده هي ان احنا نفهم لغه المشاعر علشان نستعمل اللغه دي في التواصل. واخر واحده هي ازاي نقدر نتحكم في المشاعر علشان نطلع منها بشيء ايجابي.
Okay, so I find that all of these are all connected. So if you understand one, you tend to understand the others. So we'll break it down together and hopefully we can have a better idea. So the major question we have is, how do we get emotionally intelligent kids? How can we teach our kids to understand their emotions in a way that's helpful and healthy for them? And the answer to this is that we work on being emotionally intelligent adults. One of the most important things to know is that children are like sponges, okay? They see everything, they notice everything, and they're always taking their parents as their biggest examples, okay? So even until they are fully grown adults themselves, they are watching what their parents are doing. And so this is where the concept of modeling comes in, okay? So modeling is when we behave in the ways that we hope our kids will behave. So if we want our kids to be emotionally intelligent, we need to commit to working towards emotional intelligence for ourselves as well. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So how do we do this? We're saying, okay, emotional intelligence, so how do I do that? The first point we talked about is that ability to see and understand emotions accurately, okay? So this requires us to be aware of our emotions in the first place, right? So we need to understand this we reach that point of understanding through practice, all right? Either we can practice keeping a journal where we write down our thoughts and feelings about a situation, which can be a helpful way to reflect. I don't know about any of you, but for example, when we go to confession, it can be helpful to write down what it is we're going to confess about because it keeps things organized. It makes us think about it in a deeper way. Same thing we can apply to our emotions as well. When something happens and we recognize, okay, wow, I had a big reaction to that. Let me ask myself some questions. Why did I react that way? What made me react that way? Do I need to react in a different way? And writing it down can keep our thoughts in order, okay? So that can be a first step in reflecting and understanding ourselves. Second piece is practicing mindfulness. I don't know if anyone's heard about this concept of mindfulness. It's everywhere these days. But what mindfulness is, very simply, is being in the present. So not thinking, okay, what am I doing in the future? What happened in the past? What is happening in this moment right now? What am I feeling in this moment right now? If we can get in touch with that and understand, okay, my kid just yelled at me. I feel angry right now. That's information. We can start to make decisions based on that now, okay? Another way is practicing active listening. This can sometimes be hard with our kids because sometimes they're talking and they're not saying anything. But if we practice trying to understand what they are communicating, we get to understand, okay, what is what they are saying making me feel, and how can I impact how they're feeling in the moment too, okay? And again, practicing being more observant and practice communicating. So notice all of these points start with practice, okay? This is important to know because these are all skills. This is not something you adopt overnight. This can be very difficult, but it comes with practice, okay? Any questions about this one point?
احنا ازاي نربي عيالنا ان يطلع عندهم ذكاء عاطفي مفيد لحياتهم. أنجلينا قالت أهم حاجة هي إن إحنا نستوعب إن العيال بتتعلم لما تشوفنا، فهم عاملين زي السفنجة بتسحب كل حاجة، فإذا إحنا ما خدناش على عاتقنا إن إحنا نتعلم إزاي نبقى أحسن في الذكاء العاطفي، هم مش هيقدروا يطلعوا عندهم ذكاء عاطفي. فإن إحنا نبقى النموذج المثالي هو ده أحسن حاجة للموضوع ده. هي بتقترح في أول نقطة إن حتة استيعاب المشاعر، إن الواحد يعلم نفسه عن طريق الكتابة. لما يحصل لي موقف ويحصل فيه ألاقي نفسي حصل حاجة كبيرة قوي أو انفعلت انفعال كبير، طريقة اللي أقدر أفهم تفكيري وليه أنا انفعلت الطريقة دي بإني أكتب زي ما بنعمل ساعات وإحنا رايحين نعترف أو كده. الكتابة بتساعدنا إن إحنا نبص على المشاعر وابتدي أسأل نفسي ليه أنا حسيت بالمشاعر الكبيرة دي. الحاجة التانية هي اليقظة للوقت الحاضر اللي هي المايندفولنس دي، إن أنا أعيش دلوقتي وفي اللحظة دي والمشاعر بتاعت دلوقتي، ما اقعدش أفكر ولا في مخاوف المستقبل ولا في الماضي. وآخر حاجة كبيرة هي إن إحنا إزاي نستمع بشكل نشيط لأولادنا عشان نحاول نفهم هم حقيقي بيقولوا إيه، المغزى ورا الكلام، وأسمع للآخر وبرضو أفكر الكلام بتاعهم ده طلع جوايا مشاعر إيه، عشان أنا أفهم ليه مشاعري، ليه العيل قال ده فأنا قلت ده قليل الأدب، أو يعني الواحد يفهم يعني. وإن أنا أبقى ملاحظ قوي وفي تواصل جامد بالحوار.
The second point is this ability to actually feel our emotions when they can help us make decisions, okay? So when we're feeling a lot of emotions in the moment and we're unfamiliar with them or we don't have a relationship with them, it can feel very overwhelming, okay? Has anyone had a time where, you know, your kids are all yelling at you at the same time, you don't know what to do, that feeling of like, okay, I need to leave, that feeling of overwhelm, it is understandable. There's so much happening and we don't know what to do when there's too many things to keep track of. And so what can be helpful, or what our goal needs to be, is to get to a place where the emotions are not strangers to us, but rather they're friends. We understand them when they come up. We understand why they're coming up and what they're telling us, okay? So when they're familiar, we can greet them and we know what to do with them. I always give the example of like, you know, when you have a tant that is dropping by all the time and you don't really want her there, but you can't turn her away, she's your tant. But so what do? You might not want to deal with her, but you bring her into your home, you give her some tea, you give her some desserts. Okay, she's gonna stay here for however long she's gonna stay. And it's easier to accept her into your home than to turn her away at the door, right? So your emotions, think of them as you know, we love tant, but tant can be a little overwhelming sometimes. So if we can greet the emotion with knowledge and understanding, okay, we can do something about it rather than shutting it away and saying, I can't deal with this. When it comes to our kids and teaching and showing kids that it's okay to understand these emotions, even if they are overwhelming and scary, it can be hard, right? But the biggest thing to think about is their perspective. We want to remember that this is the first time kids are experiencing the world. You know, we've been around for a little while. We've experienced what it feels like to be angry, to be sad. Sometimes, you know, it could be the first time your child is experiencing this. And so it's kind of wild for them. It's insane. It's like, okay, I feel like my heart is about to beat out of my chest. What does that mean? And so as parents, we can take on the role as guidance of explaining, you know, what emotions are, and that it's nothing to be afraid of, but we want to listen to it, okay? So there's a difference between making a decision to act out of anger and recognizing, and so that's one option, making a decision out of anger. And then the second option is making a decision to, you know, recognize I feel angry, so I'm gonna take a step back. I know what I need to do. When I feel angry, I'm gonna lower that anger level and then return to the situation. It is okay to leave and come back. Sometimes you can't do that, but if you can do it at least in your mind, to be like, okay, I'm gonna breathe, I'm gonna take a step back. We'll talk towards the end of, you know, actual strategies to help regulate with your emotions. But understanding that it's okay to not react in the moment is huge for your child, right? So we can show, or we can model to our kids that we don't have to react to the emotion. We don't have to act out of anger. We don't have to act out of sadness. We can recognize when that's happening, but then we can make a better decision for our health and for the relationships that we have. So one example I have is the answer that parents give to their kids that can sometimes make them angry and sometimes make the situation worse. And that answer is because I said so, right? Sometimes they're doing something and you just don't have the energy to deal with it. And so you tell them to stop and they're like, why? Because I said so, right? And so here we can start to see a dynamic form where we feel frustrated that your kid is doing something. And so you say, stop. And they're like, well, why? They're not trying to be annoying. Sometimes they're trying to be annoying, but more often than not, they're genuinely curious. They're like, why do I need to stop? And then your response is, because I said so. What does that do? What does that set up? It makes them angrier. Do we know why it makes them angrier? Why? Right, because it never ends. You jump into the cycle, and because they never get an answer. So remember this perspective I said earlier, that they are experiencing the world for the first time. That's scary. And so all kids want to know and want to feel is security. They want to know why. And so, you know, it's frustrating as a parent, especially if you're coming home from a very long day and you just want some quiet. And then you have Mark over here and he's jumping around and you're like, please stop. But if we can, you know, recognize, okay, I feel very frustrated. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to regulate it in the moment. And then I'm gonna give my answer. Stop, why? I feel really tired right now. So you give an answer. And you're showing at the same time how to communicate your experience and your emotions to your child. What that does, so like let's go back to the because I said so answer. That's shutting them down, okay? So by shutting them down, we teach them that curiosity is not rewarded. We might show the message that they can't ask questions. And so when they get older and they have learned that message, what do? They do the same, or they don't bother asking you questions. They go to someone else. They find other sources to ask questions because they're like, well, okay, I'm just gonna get shut down. Anyone else, right? And so what we wanna try and do is teach them a different lesson. So instead of shutting them down, we give them an answer. It's okay to show to your kids that you're tired, that you're human. If anything, you're modeling to them how to communicate when things aren't going well, when you're feeling tired, that it's okay to feel tired. It's okay to feel angry sometimes. Of course, you don't want to just be like, Mark, I'm angry. You can convey that, that's the next point. But you want to communicate in a way that teaches them how to communicate. Any questions?
التاني نقطة هي الشعور بالمشاعر من أجل اتخاذ القرار، إن الواحد يحس بمشاعره بطريقة صحية عشان يعرف ياخد قرارات سليمة. ودي بتساعدنا إن إحنا نبتدي نتصاحب على مشاعرنا ونفهمها، نبتدي نفهم نفسنا كويس، نفهم مشاعرنا كويس. كل ما فهمناها كويس، لما الشعور ده يظهر جوانا أنا هعرف أتعامل معاه بشكل صحي أكتر. فبالتالي مش هدي التعامل المرضي لأولادي، لأن زي ما قلنا هم بيتفرجوا علينا وبيتعلموا الحياة مننا. فلو أنا نفسي مش عارف أتعامل مع مشاعري لأنها غريبة عني أو أنا مش مصاحبها ومش فاهمها، يبقى أنا بدي للعيال الطريقة المرضية للتعامل بيها. ودي أول مرة هم يعدوا في المشاعر دي. فلو إحنا سلمناهم أول مرة المفتاح الغلط، قدام هم مش هيعرفوا يتعاملوا. دي أول مرة يعدوا في الحياة. إحنا عدينا في مواقف كتير لكن هم لأ. يعني مثلا كانت بتقول الموقف بتاع ان حد من العيال يجي يزن عايز كذا والواحد جاي تعبان، لا ليه؟ عشان انا قلت كده خلاص الموضوع خلص. وبيحصل حكاية الدايرة اللي انتوا قلتوها دي بتاعت ان هم بيتعصبوا جدا، وفي نفس الحكاية الدايرة لا تنتهي. فأنجلينا كانت بتقول ده بيدي العيال مفهومين. مفهوم الغلط الأولاني، ما تسألش أسئلة، مش مسموح لك هنا تسأل أسئلة معايا. 2 المفهوم التاني هو إنك تبقى عايز تفهم الحياة دي مش حاجة كويسة، مش مهم تفهم. فالبديل إنهم يا إما هيقفلوا على نفسهم أو هيدوروا على حد تاني بره الأسرة، بره بابا وبره ماما، يجيبوا منه إجابات الحياة. واكيد انتوا مش عايزين كده. فبالتالي لما بنقدر احنا نتحكم في نفسنا ونستخدم اللغه ان احنا نقول ايه، لا لاني تعبان، مش ده الوقت المناسب نتكلم فيه، ده رد كافي. يعني ده في حد ذاته رد كافي. وفي بنعلم العيال المشاعر المظبوطه، انهم سميت الشعور وقلت ليه انا ما اقدرش اتعامل في الشعور ده، الخطوه اللي ورا. فبالتالي ما بنخشش في دايره سلبيه.
So this piece about understanding emotional language and using it for using the information to our use is important. So language can be everything, okay? So language is the way we make sense of the world around us, not just for the people around us, but for ourselves too. Without language, we can't explain what's happening around us, okay? I always think about it like a translation process, like our emotions are codes, okay? If we don't understand what the code means, then we can't understand what the original message was, okay? So a big obstacle or something that gets in the way of us understanding our emotions is if we never put language to them, okay? So it's like I said, if we don't know what the code means, we don't know what the message is. So let me give an example. So there's been research that was put out that showed that parents tend to talk more to their baby girls than they do to their baby boys. What does that do? If we use more language with our girls, where does that leave our boys? Silent, right. I mean, sometimes we can argue that they're not silent at all, but they might not have access to language to explain their experience. So one example of this, okay? Anger, and I talked about anger the last time I was here. We can call it a secondary emotion. What that means is that there's something under the anger. There's something, the anger is what we see and what we hear because, it's obvious when someone is angry. And we tend to see our boys express anger easily, right? But underneath, it could be actually sadness, okay? So let's say Baba comes home from work late at night every day. And we see the kid, and he's running around. Baba tells him stop. He gets angry immediately. Okay, you deal with the anger, and it's explosive. Everyone's angry. Everyone's upset. But if we slowed down, and if we understand, okay, the anger might not actually be anger. What if it's sadness? We could maybe explore that with our child and see, why are you, what's going on? Why are you angry? Well, Baba doesn't come home, he doesn't come home until really late. I don't get to see Baba. Okay, that's sadness. He's missing his father. Now that's very different than just pure anger, right? What we would do for our child if they are sad is different than what we would do for our child if they're angry. And so it's really important to teach our kids to be able to identify what they're feeling and how to communicate it. Because if they can't communicate it to us, we can't help them, with the emotion that they're experiencing, okay? So this is an interesting difference between the boys and the girls, because we always say, oh, I'm not worried about my daughter. She's fine, she's got it. She can regulate her emotions, she's fine. We tend to assume that, she has the skills. That might be an assumption that's right. It might be an assumption that's wrong. But, it's true. Girls tend to have more language for their emotions than boys do. And it can hurt both of them. So the boys don't have the language to be able to describe how they feel. And sometimes the girls have a lot of language, but they don't know what to do with it. And so, I jumped the gun. I asked a bunch of these questions of what does anger tell us? I kind of gave the answer away. Usually it tells us there's something else happening. It means something else. With other emotions, it can also be the same. So what does happiness tell us?
So you are saying that the girl has emotion more than boys?
No. Everyone has emotions, but girls might have the language to express it more than boys. So the boys have the emotions, but they're either taught to hide it away, or they're taught that only certain emotions are okay to express, which is why we tend to see, younger boys, they're very rowdy, they're very energetic, they're very, they're quick to anger, they have a temper, because we tend to tell boys, they just don't have the language to say, I feel bored. I feel like I want to do more. I feel anxious. I feel angry. And so it comes out in their behavior rather than coming out through their words. Does that make sense? Okay. It's a good question. Any other questions? Should we, next one? Okay. So this is the last one, this idea of emotional intelligence resulting from this ability to regulate your own emotions as well as the emotions of other people. In this case, maybe your kids, okay? So, like I was saying, regulating our emotions is a huge piece of this puzzle. We can recognize our emotions, but then the second part is what we do with them, right? And so emotion regulation is a skill that allows us to look at and change our emotions in a situation. So we keep using this example of, okay, we come home from work, we're exhausted, and something happens that makes us feel frustrated. It can make us feel angry, it can make us feel sad. And emotion regulation allows us to identify all those feelings and then change it in a way that allows us to produce a more positive outcome, which means, you know, I can regulate or change my emotions in a way to change this situation so that we're not all upset now, okay? Oops. That was pretty much it. There are different types of regulation strategies. One of the most, I guess, like tangible or the most skill-based one is understanding how our emotions show up in our bodies. So when we feel angry, what does that feel like in our body? When you feel angry, what does it feel like? It feels uncomfortable, yeah. Sometimes a headache, yeah. Sometimes chest pain. What else? I know I get sweaty when I get angry. Hands shake, clenched teeth, you're tense, ready to fight. Okay, so if we know what that feels like in our bodies, okay, we can do things to address that. It could be breathing, right? When we feel angry, our breaths become shorter. We don't breathe as deeply, and so we feel tense, we feel ready to fight. One way to counteract that is take a deep breath. It sounds so simple, it sounds so silly, but it sends the signal to your brain that you're safe, that the situation can be changed, and it forces you to slow down. That's the biggest part in regulating. It's forcing yourself to slow down. You do not have to react in the moment. You can take a breath, literally take a breath. One exercise that you can do with your children, especially when you see like your younger kids getting angry, is pretending to blow bubbles, okay? So pretend you have a wand, you dip it in the soap. Okay, take a deep breath, and then blow out. Okay, you're blowing bubbles. So that's an example you can do with your kids. So for example, let's like play it out, right? Let's say your kid is starting to have a temper tantrum. And you're like, okay, all right. I can see you're feeling really upset right now. I could use a breath. Can you use a breath? Great, let's take a breath together. Let's blow bubbles, okay? Let's take a deep breath in, hold it, and then blow a big bubble. And do that a couple of times, and you'll see that, okay, their bodies are starting to slow down a little bit, because what that does is it physically slows them down. Okay, once they're able to breathe, once they're not crying, you can have a little bit more of a conversation. Okay, Habibi, what happened? Why are you upset? Okay, your brother got something you didn't get. Okay, is that something that we need to address right now? Is it something that actually needs to be escalated to this point? Let's address it in whatever way feels right in the moment, okay? There's this one analogy, or it's something that a lot of like child psychologists say, that especially for parents of young children, like infants, right? A crying baby is always better than a shaken baby, okay? So sometimes we feel so angry or frustrated or tired and we're like, just stop crying, stop crying. But that's not very safe, right? And I'm not saying everyone is shaking their babies. I know you're probably not shaking your babies. But the example is to help illustrate, you know, if your baby is safe and crying in a room and you just need a minute to go to the bathroom and breathe for yourself, that is healthier and safer for both of you because you're not yelling at your baby and your baby is not being exposed to the raw emotion or the raw reaction. And you are paying attention to the emotion that you're experiencing. You are taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your baby. Does that make sense? Yes, so for older kids, there is this tool called box breathing, okay? And the exercise is you breathe in for 4, so 4, you hold it for 4, you exhale for 4, and then you just keep doing it over and over again. That's why it's called a box. So it's like breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. And you just keep doing that until they feel a little bit calmer. Another example is having to do with your senses. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, where you ask your child, okay, I want you to name me 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can hear. And again, the function of this exercise is to slow them down. When we're feeling, I always give this example of our emotions as being a scale of 0 to 100. When we're at 100, it's impossible to do anything, right? We are just so in the emotion, our bodies are just ready to fight, ready to run, ready to just react to whatever situation is happening, that trying to do any of these things like, you know, talking about our emotions or like to try and engage with other people is just not gonna happen. And so the goal is to get you from 100 to 60, okay? Get you from 60 to 30. Once we're in that area, once we're in the lower space, okay, now we can start talking about it. Now we can start engaging in a way that's a little bit more productive, but that's not going to happen until you pay attention to your body, until you can bring your body down and have it understand it is safe, you're okay, you can breathe. Let's take some time, okay?
احنا كنا بنتكلم على تنظيم العواطف، ازاي الواحد عن طريق انه يفهم جسمه والعواطف وهي بتعدي جوه جسم الواحد. دي خطوة أولى إن أنا أفهم إيه اللي أنا هعدي فيه وأدي اسم للإيموشن، للعاطفة اللي بتعدي في جسمي، فأقدر أتعامل معاها بشكل إيجابي. فتنظيم العواطف هو مهارة لمراقبة وتغيير مسار العاطفة من أجل البنيان أو من أجل إن أنا أطلع من الموقف بشكل إيجابي. وفي استراتيجيات كتيرة. أول استراتيجية اتكلمنا عليها هي إن أنا أعرف رد فعل جسمي زي ما بنقول، وإحدى الحاجات هي إزاي نتعلم إحنا نتنفس، فنهدي نفسنا، ناخد نفس عميق. نفس ده بيقول للجسم، بيدي رسالة يعني actually بيأثر على عصب جوه الجسم اسمه الفيجاس نيرف. It's very scientific يعني، ده وراه علم كتير، دي معاه دكتوراه ووراه علم كتير. هي بس ايه يعني بتحاول تسرع علينا علشان الشورت كات، بس actually فعلا بيأثر على الجسم وبيقول للمخ، بيبعت رسالة للمخ تقول هدي نبض القلب، هدي كده هدي كده، فالواحد فعلا actually بيهدى. هي مش لا دي مش هتشتغل، بس لو اتعملت بالطريقه اللي هي علمتها لنا اللي هي 4 نعد الأربعة وإحنا بناخد نفس، 4 نحبس النفس، 4 نطلع، ونعملها كذا مرة. وللعيال الأصغر دي بتتعمل بلعبة لطيفة، نقدر نقول لهم زي ما احنا بننفخ البابلز. أنا محتاجها، ابتدي بالحوار أقول أنا محتاجة أعمل كده. ممكن نعملها كلنا خصوصا لو العيال صغيرين، وابتدينا نقول أنا محتاجها، انتوا كمان اعملوها معايا. ده هيشجع العيال ان دي حاجة عادية بتتعمل لو أنا بفقد أعصابي أو أنا متضايق أو أنا مش عارفة أتحكم. ده بيخلينا نرجع مشاعرنا في نقطة تحول. لو في نقطة اللا تحول لو طلعنا 100، لكن في نقط بنقدر نحول المشاعر جوانا لجزء أقل، وبالطريقة دي نكسب النقطة ان احنا نقدر نتحكم ونحول الموقف لشيء إيجابي.
Okay. Any questions before we move on? We also have time at the end for questions if we want to give 10 minutes. Okay. I think we'll do one scenario together and then we'll open it up for questions. But okay, let's say your son Mina, he's 7 years old and he's a kid with tons of energy, okay? Actually, you know what? We're going to skip this one because I've been using basically that example all night. We'll do this one, which it sounds like most people have older kids, will be a little bit more relevant. So your daughter Marina is 15 and she's having a hard time at school, but she hasn't said anything. Her grades are still very good, but you can tell that she's easily irritated. One day you just ask her, Malik, what's wrong, okay? And she explodes. She lashes out, she swears at you, and she tells you that she hates you, okay? I hope that's not realistic for anyone here, but it's too realistic. Sorry, it's too real, too close. Okay, so in this scenario, in this situation, what is it that you are feeling? Let's start there. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Let's say this is your daughter and she's just done this to you. How are you feeling? Okay, so you're kind of like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? Okay, what emotion is that? It's hurt. Right. So you feel hurt, right? Okay, so that's the first step, right? Because what we want to do is slow things down. We don't want to immediately jump to like, well, what's wrong with you? Wow, what was that? We want to be like, okay, wow, that was hurtful. Once we recognize that, then we can remember what we're trying to do is make decisions based off of our emotions. So we identify we feel hurt. Okay. What else are we feeling? Offended. I know I would feel angry. You just swore at me and you told me you hated me after everything I've done for you? Okay. So you're hurt, you're angry, you're offended. Any other emotions? Sadness. Okay. All right, so we have a good mix of things. Sadness, hurt, anger, offense. Those all sound very similar, but they have elements that make them a little bit different. So it's good that we name all of them, okay? So now that we know how we feel, what will you do to regulate yourself? You're standing in front of your daughter. She's just told you that she hates you. Yeah, you take a deep breath, okay. And what that deep breath does is that it tells you, okay, slow things down. All right. Instead of just reacting, right? Okay, so we slow things down. What else might we do to regulate? Yeah, maybe open up a conversation. That's the next question. How will you deal with this situation now? So we know how we feel about it. We took our breath. We feel a little bit calmer. So how are we going to deal with this? We've already said a little bit. We're going to ask her, okay, what's wrong? What else can we do to deal with this? A hug. That can be, okay, yes and no. We want to ask her if it's okay to hug. Sometimes if someone is feeling, as 100 as Marina might be feeling, you know, Bubba coming in for a hug is maybe not going to be the right move, but you can note it. You can be like, okay, I feel like I want to give you a hug. That is showing I care about you. You can even say that. You can say, you know, I can see you're upset and I feel like I want to give you a hug. Let's talk about it. You know, even just saying the words, I want to give you a hug, might be enough to slow her down. The biggest question I think here is, what do you want Marina to take away from the situation? So here is a situation where she hurt you. She maybe did something a little bit wrong. She swore at you and she told you she hated you. But what do you want her to take away from this situation? You might think that, okay, how do I maybe give her some confidence? Maybe she's lacking in confidence at school, okay. What else might you want her to take away from the situation in between you and her? You want to convey that you care about her, right? You want to convey that you are someone that she can trust. You want to convey that you're someone who is safe, that she can come talk to you even after something like this, right? And so the question becomes, if I want her to think I'm someone who is safe and who can be trusted and that I care about her, how do I do that? It's not going to be with raising my voice at her. It's not going to be with like throwing it back at her, be like, well, what's wrong with you? And then starting to get into a fight in that way, right? At the end of the day, we can communicate that hurt. We can say, hey, that really hurt me to hear you say that to me. Can we talk about why you said that to me? What's going on? I want to support you. It's all about being transparent with your child, teaching them it's okay to communicate. It's okay to have these emotions, but what is not okay is to lash out like this. And so how can we find other ways to have the emotion and convey the emotion without hurting another person? Okay?
I think sometimes as parents, when, and I have teenagers, when they do something like they say a bad word and they tell you they hate you, your first initial gut reaction is to punish them, saying, we don't say that, we don't use that word, we don't hate each other, right? And so, and that's normal. And if there is a rule in your house, which I hope there is, we do not swear here, you can say something like, all that you said, we're going to talk about it, but what you said is not okay. I'm going to put it right here. We're going to deal with it later, right? And once the whole situation is done, so they know it's not okay, but it's not your, it's hard to put it to the side, but you kind of have to. And also that they know this is not acceptable. You cannot say this to your mom or dad, but we're going to deal with that after. You know what I mean?
I think that is an excellent point. What I'm not saying is that there should never be consequences. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, like Mary said, the consequence can come after you deal with the moment itself. So I don't know if anyone's in the medical field, but like if someone got into an accident and they need their leg amputated, the doctor should not be preoccupied with the cut on their face. Okay, that's not the, it's something that needs to be looked at, but that's not the primary issue right now. The issue is the amputated leg that needs to happen.
So I had a question. How do we not get defensive as parents and attack back? I think reading this scenario,
Yep.
it's going to be like, my hurt is going to be, I'm disrespected. I feel I need to defend myself against my daughter. And that's where the lash out comes.
Yep.
Also, you said, like, give them a hug. I was thinking, I'm going to send her to her room. Be like, take 5 minutes, come back when you're better. But it's opposite of the message you're saying. So how do we make that balance?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that comes into the point 4 about regulating, okay? When we understand, like, okay, I feel disrespected, it's not about shutting down that emotion. You have every right to feel disrespected because you were disrespected. And it's this delicate balance of your role as a parent, you know? Becoming a parent makes new responsibilities, and it makes our lives a little bit harder. I say ours, though I'm a parent, I'm not a parent, full disclosure. But it makes our lives harder. And it's something that needs to be done, you know? And so can we build skills enough to know, you know, what emotion am I feeling and what I need to do with it? You know, it could very well be like, okay, go to your room. I'm gonna take some time as well, and then we'll come and talk about it later. That's totally okay. Like I said, you don't ever have to deal with the emotion or the situation right when it happens. If you need that moment, if it feels like it would be healthier for you and the relationship between your child to take a moment, it's okay to be like, okay, wow, we're gonna take some time apart and we're gonna come back in 10 minutes and we're gonna talk about this, okay? And this is you setting up the understand. Exactly, you're teaching your child also that like when something big happens, okay, I'm gonna be taking my time to think about what I did, and then you can come back and
So if I understood you correct, part of emotional regulation is me understanding my pride is hurt, but my parenting supersedes my pride, and that's why I put my kid, because that's part of it, right? I don't focus on me. If I focus on me being hurt, I know my reaction is going to be nasty.
I'm gonna respectfully disagree. I don't think it's superseding. I think you taking care of your emotion is you being a good parent, you know? And it's the whole like put your air, the oxygen mask first analogy of like, if you don't take that step back, what is your parenting going to look like versus when you do take that step back, what is your parenting going to look like? Does that make sense? Do we want to translate that whole thing?
Yeah, I think they got it. I think الأسئلة كلها عن الموقف بتاع البنت اللي جت شتمت أهلها وقالت لهم أنا مش بحبكم وإزاي نتعامل مع الموقف. الملخص الكلام والأسئلة اللي اتقالت يعني كان الحوار هو أنا مشاعري إيه اللي جوايا، ده واحد. اتنين، ممكن هي تبقى حاسة بإيه وإزاي نطلع اللي جواها. بس اللي أنجلينا بتحاول تقوله دايما نخلي عندنا هدفين. هدف الأولاني أفهم مشاعري، أخد خطوة لورا علشان أقدر لما أتصرف بالهدف اللي أنا عايزه. والهدف اللي أنا عايزه إن أنا أساعد بنتي، إن أنا أقدر أتحكم في نفسي وأهدي نفسي عشان أقدر أوصل لها الأمان وأقدر أعرف هي فعلا متضايقة من إيه ويحصل الحوار. ماري كانت بتقول طيب لو هم عملوا حاجة غلط زي الموقف اللي على ده، ما هم إحنا عندنا في البيت ما بنقولش ألفاظ، ما بنتكلمش بطريقة معينة، أعاقب ولا ما أعاقبش. فالكلام كان لأ، يعني ممكن يبقى فيه حوار عن عقاب أو حوار عن ده غلط وده صح، لكن الأولوية لازم تبقى إن أنا أتحكم في مشاعري، آخد خطوة لورا، أرجع لما ينفع يبقى فيه حوار بناء بمشاعر هادية، وبعديها أقول على فكرة ده ما كانش صح، فالنتيجة بتاعة الغلط ده هتتم برضو، يعني أنت هتتعاقب أو أنت هتتعاقبي برضو، بس بعد ما الحوار يتم. وبعدين أنا قلت لها طب أنا دلوقتي لو حد من العيال جه كلمني كده هتعصب واحس ان انا العيال دي ما بتحترمنيش فههاجمهم وهدافع عن نفسي. اللي انا فهمته ان كده احط مشاعر العيال قبل مشاعري. قالت لي غلط، ده مش صح. ساعات احنا بنكبس نفسنا اي جاس ونكتم مشاعرنا عشان ايه؟ بنضحي ان ده غلط، يعني ده مش هينتج عن النتيجة الصحية للتفاعل المظبوط مع المشاعر. لازم اتعامل مع نفسي باني اخد خطوه لورا. اوكي انا دلوقتي حاسه كرامتي تانت، هل هي فعلا قصدت تهني؟ لا، اكيد في حاجه وراها، واتكلم مع نفسي. وانس عرفت ده وهديت اقدر اعمل حوار مع بنتي. بس الاولويه لازم تكون لينا ان احنا نفهم مشاعرنا وناخد خطوه لورا، استوعبها عشان اللي يطلع صحي.
That's pretty much it. I had just a review slide here. It's everything we've just talked about. Emotional intelligence is all about the practice, about the skills we talked about. If we want our kids to be emotionally intelligent, we need to model that for them. We need to be the model for them. We need to be aware and recognize our emotions. We need to be able to learn the ways our emotions can make us or help us make decisions. We need to learn the language with our emotions, and then we need to learn ways to regulate the emotions. I know we're past 8 o'clock, but does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, doubt, objection? I have my contact information here. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to talk more. But it was wonderful being back here. Thank you for being a wonderful audience again.
ثانك يو انجلينا.
الناس راحت فين؟ مش لاقيه الناس انا كده. مريم تدرس مش موجوده، اكتريه الناس المصباح مش موجوده النهارده يعني. مريم تدرس، امجد عوض الله، تريزا البياضي، كل دول ما جوش. ريتا عبد الملاك ما جاتش. في بقى مينا صليب. هدايا فين بس؟ اي لا، ما انا مش هدي، مين قال لك هديهم؟ مينا صليب، فين مينا صليب؟ يس بس ده المواظبه الاربع اسابيع. يس مش اي حاجه، دي حاجه كده. مينا صليب خلاص. مريم هندي، مريم هندي فين راحت؟ اسم الصليب ايه دي؟ حاجه تتكسر. مريم هندي. سوزان بيباوي. تعيشوا وتواظبوا. وفاء سرجيوس ومرقص ابو شوشه. وفاء يس، وفاء ومرقص الاثنين مع بعض. في كمان عايزين نرحب بنيكول. هي نيكول مشيت؟ مشيت؟ اوكي. جوزيف. يس جوزيف اول مره يجي لنا. اول مره تجي لنا، اهلا وسهلا بيك، عايزينك تيجي على طول. ها. وفي بقى ايه، هم في كنت الاول يعني عايزه اقول لك ثانك يو على انك تيجي الحاجه الحلوه دي. ثانك يو سو ماتش. نبتدي نسحب بقى بتاع الهدايا اللوتري. اسحب يلا. مينا انت مواظب صح؟ الاربع اسابيع صح؟ انا شايفاك بس مش عاملاش اسمك. هجيب لك اسحب. ايه؟ اسحب. بس مزور ده عايز يقول. طب انا مش هلاقي الرقم اصلا. 2 اقرا
262
262 262 مين؟ يس. لا كده ايه؟ تاخدي الهدايا كلها انت. شكرا. مين بقى اسحب لي عسل. يس. تعرف تقريها؟ يس.
6 4 3 7 2 5 9.
سمعتوا؟ هي رقم كبير. 259 259 مين 259؟ لا خليك هتسحب 259 يا جماعه. يس ساره حبيبه قلبي مبروك. يلا يا لينا اخدتي روحك.
Two six zero.
260 مين؟ 260 يا نعمة. مبروك. مش عارفة ايه ده. ده تاني واحد حوشيهم. يلا يا جماعة نصلي. يلا نصلي. يا جماعة الاثنين ده اللي وراه هيبقى الحفله بتاعت قديسه رفقه مرور 7 سنين الاجتماع وثانكس جيفن الاثنين مع بعض. الاثنين ده لا اللي وراه، فعايزينكم معانا، واللي عايز يشترك حاجه في الحفله يقول لنا يعني تعيشوا كل سنه. بس كمان الاكل اللي هنا ده عايزينه يخلص، فانتوا انتوا ماشيين تاخدوه ماشي. يس بس نصلي بقى دلوقتي، نصلي لو سمحتوا، نصلي مش عايزين دوشه.
Lord, hear us when we pray, thankfully saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily